6:38 in Trinidad and Tobago. Later on in the course of the show, we'll highlight another comment from the former Prime Minister Kamala Persad-Bissessar in relation to the bail amendment bill, because that has been a hot topic as well, and the government side have been beating up on the opposition for saying that essentially they are standing in the way of really keeping the criminals behind bars or not giving them bail and so on. But we'll get to that later on. Yesterday, we heard from the incumbent via the Minister of Public Security, Kemraj Ramjatan, who is the Prime Ministerial candidate for the incumbent APNU-AFC. Well, to get their take on the Caribbean Court of Justice hearing into the March 2nd Guyana election, we're now going to be joined by a member of the opposition via Zoom. He is Joseph Hamilton, former Member of Parliament and an electoral candidate for the People Progressive Party Civic, PPP Civic. Mr. Hamilton, very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Morning to you again, sir.
Good to have you with us. And as I was discussing with you before we came on air, you are described as what is called a top-up candidate in this proportional representation system. Just explain what that means for those of us here in Trinidad and Tobago, because we are familiar with the first past the post.
We have a hybrid parliamentary system. We have 25 seats assigned to districts, and we have 40 seats assigned to top-up. Basically, that deals with the PR aspect of the electoral process.
All right, so let's move along. What is the position of the PPP Civic with this entire matter? Obviously, the PPP Civic have maintained that what has been done by the Chief Executive Officer of GCOM, the Guyana Elections Commission, is wrong by removing 115,000 voters from the list. The matter is now before the CCJ, who have to determine if they can even rule in this matter. Just clarify the PPP Civic's position at this time, please.
Let me say two things. One, the matter before the CCJ, in my view, deals with a specific declaration or made by the Court of Appeal regarding amending the Constitution that they have no authority to amend by inserting the word valid before votes cast. And so we are before the CCJ to have the CCJ overturn that decision. For viewers, it has no specific bearing on the election declaration. The election declaration is clear, coming out of the recount that is validated by the CARICOM scrutineer or observers and the OAS. And the CARICOM report indicated that that is the basis to be used, that tabulation, for the declaration of the results, which shows the People's Progressive Party Civic winning the elections of March 2nd by over 15,000 votes. So we expect that once this matter is disposed with Wednesday, the Guyana Elections Commission, through its chairperson, will call an emergency meeting to have the once and for all this declaration done, so that Irfan Ali could be sworn in as the president of Guyana. Regarding the CEO works as a statutory officer with the Guyana Elections Commission. It's not the other way around. The CEO report that he was instructed to put before the Elections Commission, the final report, had to do specifically with the allocation of seats, because he has already put before the commission the results of the recount, which showed the People's Progressive Party winning the elections by 15,000 votes, which shows 460,000 votes cast. And of that amount, the People's Progressive Party Civic won the elections by garnering 233,000 votes, and the APNU coalition garnering 217,000 votes. What he was asked to do is the normal procedure by the chairperson, is to bring a final report based on the recount declaration, she was clear in her letter to him. And therefore, all he had to do is to come back to say that these are the allocations of seats to the National Assembly, and these are the allocations of seats at the regional democratic councils based on the tabulation of the results via the recount, and that is where we are at. Everyone
but
is
Mr.
clear.
Hamilton, if you would allow me to ask the question, wasn't
Yes,
this
sir.
challenged by Miss Ezelyn David? It went to the High Court in Georgetown. Basically, the issue of not just votes cast, but valid votes cast. And that is where the APNU AFC supporters are saying that it was the right of Mr. Lowenfield to determine, even after the recount, that if any of these votes were invalid. And it was upheld by a majority decision of the High Court in Georgetown that was the correct position, and that's why it's now gone to the CCJ. So isn't there validity in the argument that first and foremost, even if the recount has been held, it has to be determined if those votes that are supposed to be declared are actually valid?
The thing is that the court, at least the appeal court, has no authority to determine validity of votes. What determines the validity of votes is the representation of the People's Act. And it outlines how, at the conclusion of an election, votes must be declared valid. And the representation of the People's Act indicates what are invalid votes. Spoil votes, votes marked for more than one candidate, votes that were not stamped. So already the qualitative matter would have been settled since the night when the polls were closed via the presiding officers. And all the documents they would have submitted to the returning officer will speak to, and if you have time at any time, you can look at the document. It speaks to so many votes were cast and so many valid votes. And the distribution of the valid votes are like this, and then it would have a column that speaks to votes that were invalid. So already the night of the election, the votes were already valid. All the recount did was to have a recount because there was a contestation to verify whether the votes that were cast based on the statement of poll issued were correct. And the recount proves that the votes cast were similar to those that were on the statements of poll that were submitted by GCOM to the party agent. The chief elections officer has no remit at all to determine validity of the votes.
I hear you on that, Mr. Hamilton, but at the end of the day, it now comes down to the role of the CCJ. Obviously, you, as a member of the PPP Civic, will be confident that the ruling will come down in your favor. But first and foremost, given what we heard here in Port of Spain, where the CCJ is headquartered, are you satisfied that they will actually rule that they can adjudicate on this matter? Because I believe that is the first port of call, that they first have to determine if they are within their legal rights to adjudicate on this matter, because there is some interpretation from the APNU AFC that the CCJ has no jurisdiction here.
Yes, well, we are satisfied and we are confident based on the presentations made by the attorneys representing Irfan Ali and Barrel Jack Dio. And we wait for the CCJ pronouncement on the matter on Wednesday. For me, I would not want to dwell too much on the likelihood. All we can say is that we went to the CCJ, argue our position based on what was put forward by our attorneys, and we wait for them. But let me repeat again, whatever or however the CCJ rules, I am saying and contending, we are contending, it has no bearing on the declaration of the results. The CCJ is to interpret a matter that has to do with the Constitution, where the Court of Appeal attempted to rewrite the Constitution and insert words. And if the viewers would remember, the Court of Appeal attempted to do the same thing when the no confidence motion matter went before them. They went ahead, at least majority of the two of the judges, to suggest that majority means absolute majority. And the CCJ threw that out.
So, Mr. Hamilton, just so we could continue to get, because it can get very muddled and very complex when we talk about all these legal arguments. But if we were to break it down, because Mr. Aubrey Norton of the APNU-AFC, earlier this week when we spoke to him, and I referenced the issue of CARICOM's condemnation and clear condemnation of what is happening, he appeared to infer that there was some sort of plot that involved CARICOM leaders, that involved CARICOM, the organization, supporting the PPP Civic, that the other international agencies, whether we're talking about the USA or Canada or the European Union, that are in cahoots with the PPP Civic to unseat the APNU-AFC illegally. What is your view on that?
2 points. One is that what you have here in Guyana, sir, is a cabal led by David Granger, who attempted to steal an elections. That's the first point. Second point, since after they were unable to do that and they were condemned by the world, including CARICOM, they have been contending with each other, people like Norton and Granger and Armon and all of them, to see who is the worst liar. And therefore, they have adopted, Lord Nelson's song. I think you're acquainted with it. King Liar, I think the song name is. So every day, they come up with another lie. For Norton to accuse CARICOM in some conspiracy with PPP, when his leader Granger say that CARICOM is and was the most legitimate interlocutor to deal with the recount. You recall that Granger, they banned or stopped Carter Center from returning to Guyana. And Granger's pronouncement was then, and I suspect still is, that he can depend on CARICOM to do a professional job. He intervened, or he asked CARICOM to intervene to scrutinize the recount exercise. And therefore, you cannot keep up, as I said, with the lies of this cabal. Every day, the lie changes. We had Granger Sunday night on one of these outfit out of New York saying that they won the elections, not by a landslide, but by a slim majority. And then he comes back 2 days after to say that he has never said he won the election, neither has he lost the election. So the point is, Norton and them, they are attempting to suggest to people different things every day, but the truth is before all of us.
And Mr. Hamilton, if you would allow me, because time is going by very, very quickly, and as I appreciate, there are a number of issues here, but for a lot of people, not just in wider CARICOM, but right here in Trinidad and Tobago, because there are so many Guyanese living here and who are following interviews like this very, very closely. From your point of view, sir, how much anxiety is this creating among Guyanese people, and indeed in the two major ethnic communities? Because I know that has been a source of tension over many decades. What is your own view as to how this prolonged issue from March the 2nd to now is affecting the mindset of the people of Guyana?
The first point to refer to is that the prolonging of this process is because, as I repeat, Granger and his cabal attempted to steal an elections. And even though CARICOM came in and we did a recount, and the recount proved the PPP won, they still continue to fabricate things as they go along. The Guyanese people, they have been very patient, recognizing at the end of the day, sir, that this can only end one way: democracy winning over dictatorship. That is how this will end. And so they are very patient. The APNU AFC cabal has attempted to stir up ethnic discord, but in large measure, they have been rebuffed by the Guyanese people. The Guyanese people know what the outcome of these elections are. And the Guyanese people have been very patient, and they will continue to be patient until the declaration happens. And we are not expecting any situation that can become where any security concerns can be developed. The APNU AFC cabal would like that to happen, so that Granger could have a reason for, I suspect, declaring some state of emergency or something like that. But we have been speaking to our people, and they know that at the end of the day, we will overcome this, and we will get to work with an Irfanani installed government.
And finally, Mr. Hamilton, in just a few seconds before we wrap up, if it is that the ruling does not come down in favor of the PPP Civic, if it is that actually, for even as unlikely as you might think it might appear, if it is that there were to be a ruling or an interpretation that would allow the APNU AFC to remain in office for at least another 5 years, will your supporters remain patient?
Well, I don't know. There again, I'm saying there is nothing before the CCJ to make a determination on the results of these elections. It is for the Guyana Elections Commission, led by the chairman, Justice Claudette Singh, who has already indicated that her declaration would be made by, based on the recount tabulation, and that is what she has instructed the CEO to do. So I'm saying again, however or whatever the CCJ rule, our expectation is that GCOM would get on with it and declare the results based on the recount tabulation, which shows that the People's Progressive Party won by 15,416 votes.
And just on that point, because you highlighted the issue of GCOM and the chairperson Claudette Singh and her instructions, but if the Chief Elections Officer Keith Lowenfield maintains that those 115,000 votes must be removed, he's the CEO of GCOM. He's supposed to be an impartial person appointed to serve. If he maintains that position, what happens next?
Well, if Lowenfield is a statutory officer employed by GCOM like many others, and GCOM would be in this place, they would have to dismiss Lowenfield or move him aside. Lowenfield works for the commission. It's not the other way around. All this authority and power, Granger and his cabal and some people are attempting to give Lowenfield, he don't have that. As I can tell you this morning, Lowenfield has been dodging the marshals, not receiving service of the court summons via the private criminal charges. If he believes that he has all this authority and power, let him go and tell the court that. So it is just a fallacy and a fantasy suggesting that Lowenfield got this. Lowenfield is a contracted employee of the Guyana Elections Commissions, whose employee the Guyana Elections Commissions can bring to an end and appoint someone else to carry out the functions of Chief Elections Officer.
Mr. Hamilton, thank you very much for taking the time to give us that perspective. We've run out of time this one, but we appreciate you taking the time to give us the perspective of the PPP Civic. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, sir.
You're more than welcome. Joseph Hamilton giving us that point of view on behalf of the opposition PPP Civic in the continuing situation in Guyana. As we come up towards 7 o'clock, we'll take a break and continue into the second hour of Morning Edition.